On a freezing winter night, a poor, exhausted mechanic sat staring at an old wooden box after a long shift. Suddenly, 4 strangers burst in, begging him to fix their broken van. Without hesitation, he helped them and got them to their important meeting just in time. He never imagined that 30 years later, at the worst moment of his life, those same 4 men would return with a shock he could have never predicted. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The studio apartment smelled like instant coffee and old carpet. Walter Hickman sat on the edge of his bed at 2 in the afternoon, still wearing his janitorial uniform from the night shift. The name tag pinned crooked on his chest read Walt in faded letters, 39 years old. That's what the calendar said, though. Walt didn't feel 39. He felt ancient, like something that had been left out in the rain too long and forgotten. The room was small, cramped, really. A hot plate sat on a folding table by the window. A mini fridge hummed too loud in the corner, the kind you'd find in a college dorm room. A bathroom you could barely turn around in. The shower had rust stains that wouldn't come out no matter how much bleach Walt used, but it was cheap. $600 a month, utilities included. That mattered when you made $11 an hour mopping floors at Spokane Community College. Walt rubbed his face with both hands. His shift had ended at 6 in the morning. He'd come home, heated up a can of soup, eaten it standing at the counter. Then he'd sat down on the bed, meaning to change out of his uniform and get some sleep. That was 8 hours ago. He couldn't seem to move. Couldn't seem to do anything except sit here and stare at the wooden box on top of the dresser. The box had followed him for years, through 6 different apartments in 4 different cities. It was made of oak, darkened with age, with brass hinges that needed polishing. Walt's father had made it back in the 50s, had given it to Walt when he turned 18. For keeping your important things, his father had said. Walt hadn't opened it in months, maybe a year. He tried not to look at what was inside. Looking hurt too much. But today, for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He stood up slowly, his knees cracked, his back ached from 8 hours of pushing a mop across linoleum floors. Everything hurt these days. The doctor said it was from the physical work, said he should stretch more. But stretching didn't pay bills. He walked the 3 steps from the bed to the dresser. His hands hovered over the box, hesitated. Then he lifted the lid. The smell hit him first. Old paper, dust, the faint scent of cigarette smoke from clubs that didn't exist anymore. Inside were the relics of a different life, a life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. Cassette tapes, 20 or 30 of them stacked in neat rows, handwritten labels, the ink smudged and faded. Walt het let love at the Blue Room. Hickman studio session. WP and the Riders demo. Concert posters rolled up tight. Walt pulled one out carefully and unrolled it. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges. Live music. Saturday night, Walt Hickman and the Night Riders, the Horseshoe Club, Cheyenne, Wyoming. Below his name, someone had drawn a cartoon of a cowboy playing guitar. He set the poster aside and kept digging. Found a set list written on a bar napkin. Found a guitar pick, the edges worn smooth from use. Found a newspaper clipping from the Casper Star-Tribune. Local guitarist draws crowd at county fair. And there, tucked in the very bottom corner, was the photograph. Walt picked it up with both hands. The edges were bent. The colors had faded to pale blues and yellows like an old postcard. But he could still see himself clearly. 20 years old, maybe 21. He was sitting on a stool in what looked like someone's garage, holding a Gibson guitar across his lap. His hair was long, past his shoulders. He wore a denim jacket and a smile that suggested he knew exactly where his life was heading. The guitar in the photo was a beauty. A Gibson ES 335, cherry red, semi-hollow body. Walt had saved for 2 years to buy that guitar. Worked 3 jobs, slept on friends' couches, ate ramen noodles for dinner 6 nights a week. He'd been good, really good. People told him all the time. Club owners wanted him back. Other musicians wanted to play with him. Girls waited after shows to talk to him. There'd been interest from a record label once. A scout from RCA had seen him play in Denver, had given him a business card, said, "Call me when you're ready to get serious." Walt had carried that card in his wallet for 3 months, had stared at it every night before bed, had practiced until his fingers bled, getting ready for the audition that would change everything. But then life happened. Life always happened. He met Karen at a truck stop diner outside Casper. She was a waitress. 21 years old, pretty, with dark hair and practical eyes. She didn't care that Walt played guitar in bars, didn't care about dreams or record deals. She cared that he seemed stable enough, that he didn't drink too much, that he looked like he might eventually grow up and become a real adult. They got married 4 months after they met. Walt was 23. He sold the Gibson to pay for the wedding and a security deposit on a small apartment. Told himself it was temporary. Told himself he'd buy another guitar once they got settled. Karen got pregnant right away. Amber was born 9 months after the wedding. And suddenly Walt had responsibilities. A wife, a baby, bills that needed paying every month without fail. So he did what everyone told him was the right thing. He put away his dreams, he got serious, he found real work. Walt set the photograph down, stared at that young man with the long hair and the confident smile. That stranger who used to be him. You stupid kid, he whispered. You had no idea what you were giving up, but that wasn't fair. That kid had been trying to do the right thing, had been trying to be responsible, to be a man, to take care of his family. It just hadn't worked out the way he'd planned. Nothing ever did. Walt closed the box and stepped back. The room felt smaller suddenly. The walls pressing in, the ceiling too low. He couldn't breathe right. He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, stepped out into the hallway, took the stairs down to the street. Outside Spokane was gray and cold, November weather, the kind that got into your bones and stayed there. Walt walked without any particular destination, just walked. Past the gas station on the corner, past the laundromat where the same 3 people seemed to be washing clothes every time he went by, past the Thai restaurant that always smelled like peanuts and chili oil. He ended up at a bus stop and sat down on the bench. Watched cars go by. Watched people hurry past with their heads down against the wind. An old woman sat down next to him. She had a shopping bag full of groceries and kind eyes. Cold today, she said. Yes ma'am, Walt replied. You waiting for the number 12? No ma'am. Just sitting. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Sometimes sitting is enough. They sat in silence for a while. Then the number 12 bus came and the old woman got on. She waved to Walt through the window as the bus pulled away. Walt stayed on the bench until his fingers went numb from the cold. Then he walked back to his apartment, climbed the stairs and lay down on his bed still wearing his jacket. He stared at the ceiling, at the water stain that looked like a map of somewhere he'd never been. Your life's been over for a long time, he said to the empty room. Might as well accept it. The words hung in the air, true and heavy and final. Walt closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tried not to think about the photograph in the wooden box. Tried not to think about the young man with the guitar who'd believed the world was full of possibilities. That young man was dead. Had been for almost 20 years. All that was left was this. A janitor in a studio apartment. 39 years old. Alone. Forgotten. Outside the wind picked up. Rain started to fall. Walt listened to it drum against the window and wondered if anyone would notice if he just disappeared. If anyone would care. Probably not. He was already gone. Had been for a long time. Ridgefall, Wyoming. Population 1,800. The kind of town that had 1 stoplight, 1 high school, 1 grocery store and 3 churches. The kind of place where everybody knew your name and half your business before you even walked through the door. Walt had loved it once. 10 years ago when he was 29 years old and thought he had his life figured out. He owned Hickman's Garage on Main Street, right between the hardware store and the diner. A good business. Steady customers. He'd bought it with money he'd saved working construction jobs across Wyoming and Colorado. The garage had been his second dream. Not the dream, not the music, but something solid. Something practical. Something that would support his family. Something his wife Karen could be proud of. He'd given up the guitar years earlier. Sold it to pay for the wedding and their first apartment. Put away the cassette tapes. Stopped playing clubs, started acting like a responsible adult. For a while it worked. Walt ran the garage. Karen kept the books and managed their small house on Maple Street. Their daughter Amber grew up healthy and happy. They had Sunday dinners at Karen's parents' house. Went to the county fair every summer. Lived the kind of life that looked good from the outside. But the garage wasn't making enough money. Not consistently. Some months were good, most months were tight. Walt took out a loan from First National Bank to buy new equipment. Then another loan to cover slow periods. Then another to fix the roof when it started leaking. The debt piled up. Slow at first, then faster. Karen started getting worried. Started asking questions about the books. Started talking about maybe selling the garage and moving somewhere with better opportunities. We could go to Denver, she said one night over dinner. Amber was 6 years old, eating mac and cheese at the kitchen table. My cousin works for a construction company there. Says they're always hiring. I'm not working construction, Walt said. I own a business that's drowning us in debt. It'll turn around, it always does. But it didn't turn around. The economy crashed and took half of Wyoming's industry with it. People stopped fixing their cars. Started driving them until they literally fell apart, then bought cheap replacements. Walt's customer base dried up. He had to let go of his mechanic, Jerry, who'd worked for him since the beginning. Then he had to let go of the part-time kid who helped with oil changes. By early spring it was just Walt, working 12, 14, 16-hour days, coming home smelling like motor oil and sweat, falling asleep in his work clothes because he was too exhausted to shower. Karen grew distant, stopped asking about the business, stopped asking about anything. She'd sit at the kitchen table after Amber went to bed, doing crossword puzzles, not talking. The marriage had been cracking for years, really. Walt knew it. Karen knew it. They'd gotten married too young for the wrong reasons. Karen wanted security and stability. Walt had wanted to prove he could be responsible, could be a good husband and father even without the music. But you can't build a life on proving something. Not for long. The final break came in March. Walt came home late one Tuesday night. Almost midnight. He'd been trying to fix a transmission problem on a Ford that the owner couldn't afford to pay for but desperately needed for work. Walt had stayed late, working for free because that's what you did in a small town. You helped people. Karen was still up, sitting at the kitchen table, but not doing crossword puzzles this time. Just sitting. Staring at the wall. 2 suitcases sat by the door. I'm taking Amber to Phoenix, she said. Didn't look at him, just said it like she was commenting on the weather. Walt stood in the doorway, still holding his lunchbox. What? My sister has room for us. I called her last week. We're leaving in the morning. Karen, what are you talking about? She finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired. Not angry, just tired. Done. I can't do this anymore, Walt. This town, this life, watching you work yourself to death for a business that's failing. I want something better for Amber, something better for me. We can figure this out. We can make it work. No, we can't. Her voice was flat, final. I've been trying to make it work for 8 years. I'm done trying. What about me? What about our marriage? What marriage? Karen asked, and there was no bitterness in her voice. Just exhaustion. We haven't been happy in years, Walt. You know it. I know it. We got married because I was young and wanted security, and you were trying to prove you could be responsible. That's not enough to build a life on. So you're just leaving. Yes. What about Amber? She needs her father. You can visit when you get back on your feet. When you're stable. But the way she said it, Walt knew she didn't believe that would happen. Didn't want it to happen. He tried calling over the next few weeks, got Karen's sister's number from directory assistants. Left messages. Karen never called back. He tried writing letters, sent them to the Phoenix address. Most came back unopened. The bank came for the garage 6 months later. Walt couldn't make the payments. Couldn't catch up. The man from First National wore a suit too nice for Ridgefall and spoke in polite, apologetic tones as he explained the foreclosure process. Walt lost everything in a single year: his family, his business, his sense of who he was supposed to be, and the music. He'd given that up years earlier, thinking it was the responsible thing to do, thinking he was becoming a man. Now he had nothing to show for it. No wife, no daughter, no garage, no guitar, just guilt that sat in his chest like a stone. He remembered sitting in the empty garage after they'd changed the locks, looking at the oil stains on the concrete floor. 29 years old and completely broke, not just financially, broke in every way that mattered. You failed, he whispered to himself that night. You failed at everything. The echo in the empty building was the only answer he got. And the worst part, Karen slowly, carefully poisoned Amber against him. Told her that Daddy had chosen the garage over them. That he'd let them go without a fight. That he didn't care enough to come see her. None of it was true. But the truth didn't matter when you were 9 years old and confused and angry, and your mother was the only parent you had. December. The coldest night of the year. The weather report on the radio said it would drop to 15 below zero by midnight. Already it was bitter outside, the kind of cold that hurt your lungs when you breathed. Wind came howling across the plains, picking up snow and throwing it sideways across Route 26. Walt was at the garage for the last time. The bank had given him until midnight to clear out any personal tools, anything that belonged to him and not the business. After that, they'd change the locks and start emptying the building for auction. He'd been working since 6 that evening. Moving slowly, packing wrenches and socket sets into cardboard boxes he'd gotten from behind the grocery store. There wasn't much that was actually his. Most of the equipment had come with the garage when he bought it, or he'd purchased it with business loans, which meant it belonged to the bank now. The bay doors were closed against the cold, but the building wasn't heated. Walt's breath came out in clouds. His fingers were stiff, clumsy. He'd given up wearing gloves because he needed the dexterity to sort through tools and small parts. He found things he'd forgotten about. A coffee mug with "World's Okayest Mechanic" printed on it. Jerry had given it to him as a joke a few Christmases ago. A photograph of Amber, maybe 4 years old, sitting on the hood of a car Walt had been working on. She was smiling, gap-toothed, holding a toy wrench like she was helping Daddy. Walt stared at that photo for a long time. Amber would be 9 now, almost 10, growing up in Phoenix without him, being told by her mother that he didn't care, that he'd abandoned them. He tucked the photo into his jacket pocket and kept packing. Around 9:30, he carried a box of tools out to his pickup truck. The wind hit him like a wall, cutting through his jacket, making his eyes water. He loaded the box into the truck bed and hurried back inside. That's when he heard it. Music, faint at first, almost lost in the wind. Then clearer as he stood still and listened. Someone was playing guitar out on the highway. Not just strumming random chords but really playing. The notes were clean and precise, a melody that cut through the howling wind like it had something to prove. Walt walked to the bay doors and cracked one open, peered out into the darkness. About 100 yards south, pulled off on the shoulder of Route 26, sat an old van. He could see it in the spill of light from the Chevron station down the road. Ford Econoline, judging by the shape. Late 70s model maybe. Primer gray with patches of rust visible even from this distance. The music was coming from there. Walt should have closed the door, should have gone back to packing. He had 2 more boxes to load, then he needed to drive to the motel and try to sleep a few hours before his shift at the Chevron started at 6 a.m. This wasn't his problem. Nothing in Ridgefall was his problem anymore. But his feet carried him forward anyway. Out into the brutal cold, down the gravel shoulder of the highway, wind cutting at his face and hands. His boots crunched through snow that had drifted across the pavement. As he got closer, he could see 4 silhouettes inside the van, visible through the windows. Young men, he thought. Early 20s maybe. One of them was playing an acoustic guitar, fingers moving fast across the fretboard. Walt reached the van and knocked on the sliding door. The music stopped abruptly. The door slid open. A kid looked out at him. Maybe 23, 24 years old. Sharp blue eyes. Strong jawline. The kind of face that suggested he'd always gotten what he wanted in life. He held the guitar loosely, casually, like it was part of his arm. "Yeah?" the kid said. Not unfriendly but wary. "You boys broken down?" Walt asked. His voice sounded rough from disuse. He hadn't talked to anyone in 2 days. "Engine died about an hour ago," another kid said from the driver's seat. This one had curly brown hair and worried eyes. "We've been trying to get it started, but nothing's working. Not even turning over." Walt looked past them into the van. It was packed with equipment. Guitar cases, an amplifier, duffel bags, fast food wrappers. The accumulated debris of people living out of a vehicle. "You got somewhere you need to be?" he asked. The kid with the guitar nodded. "Denver, we've got a meeting tomorrow morning at 8 sharp. Capitol Records." Capitol Records. Walt raised his eyebrows. "That's a long way from here. Tell me about it." The kid with the guitar stepped down from the van. He was tall, maybe 6'1", wearing a denim jacket that looked thin for this weather. "We've been on tour for 3 months. Playing anywhere that would have us. This meeting, it's our shot, only shot we're gonna get." A third kid appeared in the doorway. Rounder face, softer features. He looked scared. "You know anything about engines, mister?" "I know a few things," Walt said. "I run the garage back there." He pointed up the road toward Hickman's, then corrected himself. "Ran it, not anymore. Could you take a look?" The curly-haired kid asked. "We'll pay you. We don't have much." "But how much is not much?" Walt asked. The 4 of them exchanged glances. The guitar player pulled out a wallet, checked it, then asked the others, "What have you got?" They pooled their money, crumpled bills and loose change, counted it twice. $46, the guitar player said. "That's everything. We were saving it for gas money to get through Colorado." $46. Walt almost laughed. He'd had weeks like that. Months where $46 was the difference between eating and not eating. "What time's your meeting?" he asked. 8 a.m. Walt checked his watch. 9:45. Denver was 6 hours away in good weather, good roads. In this snow with ice forming on the highway, 7, maybe 8 hours. Even if he got their van running right now, they wouldn't make it. "You got money for a tow truck?" he asked, already knowing the answer. The guitar player shook his head. $46, that's it. Walt should have walked away, should have told them to call a tow in the morning, work something out with a shop in Denver, reschedule the meeting, should have wished them luck and gone back to his packing. He had his own disaster to deal with, his own life falling apart. He didn't need to take on their problems too, but then the kid with the guitar shifted his weight, and the dome light inside the van caught the instrument clearly. A Gibson acoustic, older model, maybe from the 70s. The wood was worn in places, darkened by years of handling. You could see it had been played hard and loved well. Walt knew that guitar, not that specific one, but the type, knew what it felt like in your hands, knew the sound it made when you hit the strings just right. And suddenly he wasn't 39 years old, standing on a frozen highway in Wyoming. He was 20, before Karen, before Amber, before the garage, before all the responsibilities that had buried his dreams. He was sitting in a van just like this one, chasing a dream that felt so close he could taste it. He remembered that hunger, that desperate need to prove yourself, to show the world you were worth something. These kids had that. He could see it in their eyes. "Pull it into my garage," Walt heard himself say. "I'll take a look." The guitar player's face transformed. "Are you serious? I mean, I can't promise I can fix it, and even if I do, you're not making Denver by 8, but I'll see what I can do." "Thank you," the curly-haired kid said. "Seriously, man, thank you so much." Walt pointed up the road. "Hickman's garage. The one with the light on. I'll meet you there." He walked back to the garage, wondering what the hell he was doing, wondering why he couldn't just let these kids figure it out themselves. He had enough problems, enough failures, but maybe that was exactly why he was helping. Because he knew what it felt like to have everything riding on one moment, one chance, one meeting that could change your whole life. He'd had that chance once, and he'd let it slip away. Maybe he could make sure these kids didn't make the same mistake. Walt opened the bay doors wide and turned on every light in the garage, waited while the van sputtered and died and sputtered again, 3 of the kids pushing while one steered, until finally they got it inside. The guitar player stepped out and extended his hand. "I'm Eddie Morrison." Walt shook it. "Walt Hickman, that's Luke driving. Sean's the one who looks terrified, and Tyler's in back, trying to pretend he's not freaking out." "Nice to meet you boys." Walt walked to the front of the van. "Pop the hood, let's see what we're dealing with." Eddie pulled the release. Walt lifted the hood and leaned in, studying the engine with eyes that had seen thousands of engines over the years. It only took him about 3 minutes to diagnose the problems. "Well?" Eddie asked, standing at his elbow like he might actually understand what he was seeing. Walt didn't answer right away. He checked the fuel pump, tested the ignition wires, looked at the radiator hoses. "You boys know anything about engines?" he finally asked. "Not a damn thing," said Sean, the round-faced kid. "We know music, that's about it." The 4th member of the band, a quiet one named Tyler, spoke up for the first time. "How bad is it?" Walt straightened up and wiped his hands on a rag. "Fuel pump's dead. You've got burnt wiring in the ignition system, and your radiator's leaking coolant." Eddie's face fell. "Can you fix it?" "I can fix it." Walt looked at the clock on the wall. 10:15. "Question is whether I can fix it fast enough to get you to Denver by morning." "We'll help," Luke said quickly. "Just tell us what to do." Walt almost smiled. "You know how to make coffee?" "Yeah." "Then make a pot, strong. This is gonna be a long night." They got to work. Walt pulled parts from his dwindling inventory, hoping he had everything he needed. The boys did what they could, which wasn't much, but they tried. They brought him tools, held flashlights, asked questions that showed they were paying attention. Around midnight, they took a break. Walt sat on an overturned bucket, drinking coffee that was more sludge than liquid. Eddie sat across from him on a stack of tires, still holding that guitar. "You play?" Eddie asked, nodding at an old photograph tacked to the wall. It was the same one from Walt's box. 20-year-old Walt with his Gibson. "Used to," Walt said. "Why'd you stop?" Walt shrugged. "Life got in the way. Got married, had a kid, needed steady money." "You any good?" "I was all right." Eddie studied the photo for a long moment. "You ever get a shot, like we're getting?" Walt took a long sip of coffee. "It burned going down. Once long time ago. There was interest from a label, but I got married instead. Sold my guitar to pay for the wedding. Figured I'd be responsible, be a good husband and father." "Did it work out?" Eddie asked quietly. Walt thought about Karen driving away with Amber, about the foreclosure papers, about sleeping in a $30 motel room and working at a gas station for minimum wage. "No," he said finally. "Lost my family anyway. Lost the business, and the music." He shook his head. That was already long gone. The other 3 boys had gathered around now, listening quietly. Sean spoke up. "That's rough, man. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, just be smart." Walt stood up. "Now let's get back to work. You boys have a dream to catch." They worked through the night. Walt's hands moved with muscle memory, replacing parts, splicing wires, sealing leaks. The boys brought him more coffee, told him about their tour, about the tiny clubs they'd played in Montana and North Dakota, about crowds of 12 people who actually listened. Around 4 in the morning, Luke asked, "Do you regret it, giving up music?" Walt was elbow deep in the engine bay, replacing the fuel pump. He stopped, thought about it, really thought about it. "Every single day," he said finally. "But regret doesn't change anything. It just sits inside you and gets heavier." "Tyler," the quiet one said, "what would you do differently, if you could go back?" Walt secured the last bolt on the fuel pump, and straightened up. His back ached. His hands were black with grease. "I'd tell my 20-year-old self to chase the dream, even if it meant failing, even if it meant being irresponsible, because at least then I'd know if I had what it took."
He looked at the four of them, young, scared, hopeful. You boys already know something I didn't figure out until it was too late. You know you have to try. That's half the battle right there. At 5:30, Walt tested the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. He tried again. Same result. Eddie checked his watch. Even if we leave right now, we're not making Denver by 8. Walt closed his eyes. He'd worked for 7 hours straight, done everything right, but sometimes everything right still isn't enough. Then an idea hit him. A crazy idea. The kind of idea that probably wouldn't work but was better than nothing. Hold on, he said. I might know someone who can help. Hank Turner had been driving trucks for over 20 years, long haul, cross-country routes. He'd been Walt's friend since high school, back when Ridgefall actually had a high school instead of busing kids to the next town over. Walt called him from the garage office phone at 5:45 in the morning. You better be dying. Hank answered on the fourth ring. His voice was thick with sleep. Where are you right now? Walt asked. What state are you in, Hank? A pause. Then I'm about 40 miles west of Ridgefall on 26. Stopped at a rest area for a few hours. Why? Walt couldn't believe it. Pure luck, or fate, or something. I need a favor. Of course you do. It's 6 in the goddamn morning. I've got 4 kids here who need to get to Denver by 8. They've got a meeting with Capitol Records, life-changing meeting, but their van's broken, and even if I get it running, they won't make it in time. Silence on the other end. Then Hank said, You want me to give them a ride? Yeah.
Walt, I'm hauling refrigerators to Salt Lake City. I've got a schedule. I know, and I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Another long silence. Walt could hear Hank breathing, weighing the request. How important? Hank finally asked. Walt looked through the office window at the 4 young men sitting in their broken van, exhausted and running out of hope. Important enough that I stayed up all night trying to help them. Important enough that I'm asking you to do something crazy. Hank sighed. All right, but they're riding in the cab with me, and if my dispatcher asks, they're hitchhikers I picked up out of the kindness of my heart. Thank you, Hank. You owe me a case of beer when this is over. Deal. Walt hung up and walked back into the garage. Pack up your stuff, he told the band. You're getting a ride to Denver. Eddie stood up. What? Friend of mine's a truck driver. He's 40 miles west of here, heading your direction. He'll get you to Denver by 8, maybe even 7:30 if he pushes it. The 4 of them just stared at him. You're serious? Luke asked. Dead serious. He'll be here in 30 minutes. You better be ready to go. They scrambled, grabbed guitars and duffel bags from the back of the van, checked and double-checked that they had everything. Eddie pulled out that crumpled envelope again, the one with $46 in small bills. He held it out to Walt. For your time, Eddie said. And for calling your friend. We know it's not much, but Walt waved him off. Keep it. You're gonna need gas money when you leave Denver. We can't just take your help for free. Yes, you can. Walt's voice was firm. Look, I don't have much in this life. No family, no business, no future to speak of. But I can give you this, a chance. Don't waste it. Sean's eyes were wet. He looked like he was about to cry. Why are you doing this for us? You don't even know us. Walt looked at each of them, saw himself at their age, saw the dream he'd abandoned, saw the life he could have had if he'd been braver, if he'd been willing to fail spectacularly instead of fading slowly. Because you still have a shot, Walt said quietly. I don't, and somebody should get to find out if they're good enough. Tyler spoke up for maybe the 3rd time all night. What if we're not good enough? What if we go to Denver and they tell us we suck? Then at least you'll know, Walt said. And you can move on, or try again, or do something else. But you won't spend the rest of your life wondering. Eddie stepped forward and pulled a cassette tape from his bag. The label was handwritten. Red Valley Road Demo. This is our demo, Eddie said. The songs we're playing for Capitol. He pressed the tape into Walt's hand. When we make it, and I mean when, not if, we're coming back here. We're gonna find you and thank you properly. I promise. Walt took the tape, looked at the handwritten label. You don't have to do that, he said quietly. Yeah, we do. Eddie's voice was steady, certain. Because what you did tonight, that's not something you forget. That's the kind of thing that changes you. Headlights swept across the garage walls. Hank's 18-wheeler pulled up outside. engine rumbling like distant thunder. The boys grabbed their stuff and headed for the door. Eddie turned back one last time. "We won't forget you, Mr. Hickman. I swear to God we won't." Walt nodded. Couldn't trust his voice right then. They piled into Hank's truck, guitars and duffel bags and all. Walt watched the taillights disappear down Route 26, heading east toward Colorado and whatever future was waiting for them there. He stood in the empty garage for a long time after they were gone. Then he packed up the last of his tools, turned off the lights and locked the door behind him. Within days he'd be in a different city. Within weeks Ridgefall would be nothing but a memory. But he kept the cassette tape, tucked it in the wooden box with all his other memories. And maybe someday those kids would make it. Would prove that taking a chance was worth it. Walt turned off the lights and locked the door for the last time. 3 weeks later Walt was in Fort Collins, Colorado. He'd found work at a tire shop. $12 an hour. Better than the Chevron job but not by much. He called Karen's sister's house in Phoenix from a payphone outside a convenience store. It was Sunday afternoon. Maybe Amber would be home. Karen's sister answered. "Stop calling here, Walt. I just want to talk to my daughter for 5 minutes. Is that too much to ask?" "Karen doesn't want you calling." "I don't care what Karen wants. Amber is my daughter too." A long silence. Then quietly, "She doesn't want to talk to you. She thinks you abandoned her." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not true. Karen left me. That's not how Amber sees it. And Karen's not going to tell her different. So maybe you should just let it go." "Let it go?" "Yeah, let Amber have a normal life. Stop confusing her." The line went dead. Walt stood there with the phone in his hand, listening to the dial tone. A car drove past, music blaring, some pop song he didn't recognize. He hung up the phone and drove back to his apartment, a studio smaller than the one in Spokane. The wooden box sat on a milk crate that served as a nightstand. Walt opened it, looked at the cassette tape. Red Valley Road demo. He wondered if those kids had made it to Denver on time, if the meeting had gone well, if they'd gotten signed. He'd probably never know. Walt closed the box and lay down on the bed, stared at the ceiling, tried not to think about Amber growing up thinking her father had abandoned her, tried not to think about how everything he'd touched had turned to dust. The years passed. Colorado for 2 more years. Then Idaho, where Walt got a job doing maintenance at a hospital. The pay was better. $15 an hour plus benefits. He tried reaching out to Amber again when she turned 18. Called information. Got Karen's current number in Phoenix. Left a message. "Amber, it's your dad. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I want you to know I never stopped thinking about you. Never stopped trying. If you want to talk, call me." He left his number. Waited. She never called. Walt kept working, kept moving. Different cities, different jobs, always moving forward because standing still hurt too much. He turned 40, then 45, then 50. The wooden box came with him everywhere. The cassette tape still inside, never played. He'd never bought a tape player, never saw the point. Eventually Walt crossed into Washington, found work at a community college in Spokane. Janitorial services. Night shift, $11 an hour. The job was mindless, mopping floors, emptying trash cans, cleaning bathrooms. But it was steady, and steady was all Walt needed at this point. He stopped trying to find Amber. She was in her 30s now, had her own life, didn't need a father who'd been absent for decades showing up and complicating things. Walt convinced himself it was kinder this way. Kinder to just disappear. He never listened to music anymore. It hurt too much. So he had no idea that a band called Red Valley Road had become famous. Had no idea they'd released 3 platinum albums. Had no idea they'd played Madison Square Garden and major venues across the country. And he definitely had no idea about the song they'd written. Man on Route 26 became a hit. Went platinum. Played on rock stations for years. The song told the story of a stranger in Wyoming who'd saved 4 broke kids on the coldest night of the year, who'd worked all night for free, who'd called in a favor to get them to Denver. But Walt never heard it, never knew he was the man in the lyrics. He just kept mopping floors, kept living in smaller and smaller apartments as rent kept going up, kept the wooden box on whatever surface served as furniture. By the time 3 decades had passed, Walt had been alone for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to have people in his life, to have conversations that lasted more than 2 minutes, to matter to anyone. He was 72 years old, invisible, forgotten, a ghost moving through the world, leaving no mark. Some nights he'd open the wooden box, look at the photograph of his younger self, at that kid with the guitar and the dreams. "I'm sorry," he'd whisper to that photograph. "I'm sorry I wasted you." Then he'd close the box and try to sleep, because what else was there? Years after Red Valley Road retired from touring, the 4 members of the band sat in Eddie Morrison's house in Laurel Canyon, Los Angeles. They'd made it, more than made it. 3 platinum albums, 7 top 40 hits, tours that sold out arenas, money beyond what they'd ever imagined. And they'd never forgotten the man in Wyoming. "We should try to find him," Eddie said. It wasn't the first time he'd brought it up. "Walt Hickman, we said we'd come back and thank him." "It's been decades," Luke pointed out. "He could be anywhere. He could be dead, or he could be alive and thinking we forgot about him." Eddie stood up, pacing. "That bothers me. That bothers me a lot." Sean nodded. "Me too. Everything we have, everything we became started with that night, with him helping us. So we hire someone to find him," Tyler said. "A private investigator." They did exactly that. The first investigator was a guy in Wyoming. He went to Ridgefall, found the spot where Hickman's garage used to be. It was a parking lot now. Asked around town. Most people remembered the garage. Fewer remembered Walt specifically. Nobody knew where he'd gone. The investigator checked employment records in Wyoming. Found 3 Walter Hickmans. None of them were the right one. The second investigator was more thorough. She expanded the search to surrounding states. Found employment records for a Walter J. Hickman who'd worked at a tire shop in Fort Collins, then at a hospital in Idaho. But the trail went cold after that. The third investigator picked up where the second left off. He was patient, methodical, checked every Walter Hickman in the western United States, called them, visited them, showed them the photograph that Eddie had kept all these years. The one from the garage wall. Eventually he found a lead. A Walter Hickman who'd worked maintenance at a hospital. Hospital records showed he'd transferred his benefits to a new job. The new job was in Washington State. The investigator followed that thread. Employment records, tax filings, until finally he found him. Walter Hickman, age 72, night janitor at Spokane Community College. The investigator called Eddie. "I found him. He's in Washington, Spokane." Eddie felt something crack open in his chest. Relief, joy, something else he couldn't name. "Are you sure it's him?" "I'm sure." I showed his supervisor the old photograph. She confirmed it's the same guy. Just older. Eddie called the others. They met at his house that same day. "We go see him," Eddie said. "All 4 of us. We go and we thank him properly." "What if he doesn't remember us?" Luke asked. "He'll remember. People don't forget nights like that." They made a plan, but they wanted to do more than just show up and say thank you. They wanted to give Walt something real, something that would change his life the way he changed theirs. The Red Valley Foundation Music School had been running for several years. They taught kids who couldn't afford lessons, kids from rough neighborhoods, kids like they'd been. "We offer him a job," Sean suggested. "Teaching guitar, full salary, benefits. We pay to move him out here," Tyler added. "Set him up in a nice place. And we give him royalties," Eddie said. From Man on Route 26, he inspired that song. He deserves a share. They all agreed. But there was one more thing Eddie wanted to do. He called a friend who worked at Capitol Records, asked for a favor. "Can you track down contact information for anyone related to Walter Hickman, family members? I'm looking for his daughter." It took some time, but they found her. Amber Hickman, married name Reeves, age 42, art teacher in Tucson, Arizona. Eddie called her, explained who he was, why he was calling. Amber started crying on the phone. "I've been looking for my dad for years," she said. "Ever since my mom died. She had all these letters he'd sent, hidden in a box. Letters I never knew existed. He never stopped trying to reach me. We found him," Eddie said gently. "He's in Spokane. We're going to see him next month. Would you like to come with us?" "Yes," Amber said immediately. "Yes, please." Walt's life at 72 was exactly as small as it had been for years. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. He didn't have friends. Didn't have hobbies. Didn't have anything except the job and the studio apartment, and the wooden box that held the ghost of who he used to be. Some mornings he woke up and wondered why he was still doing this. Still getting up. Still going through the motions. There wasn't a good answer to that question. He just kept going because stopping seemed harder than continuing. 72 years old. Alone. Working a job that paid just enough to survive but not enough to live. Walt had accepted this was all there was. All there would ever be. He was wrong. But he didn't know that yet. Not until the knock came on a Saturday morning in April. The knock came at 9:30 on a Saturday morning. 3 sharp raps on the apartment door. Walt was making instant coffee in his underwear, and a t-shirt that had holes in it. He wasn't expecting anyone. The landlord only showed up on the 1st of the month. The neighbors kept to themselves. He set down the coffee mug and grabbed a pair of jeans from the floor. Pulled them on. Didn't bother with a shirt. When he opened the door, 4 men stood in the hallway. They were middle-aged now, dressed in expensive casual clothes, dark jeans, button-up shirts, leather jackets that probably cost more than Walt's entire wardrobe. They looked successful, confident, like men who'd made something of their lives. The one in front had gray in his hair now, and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 decades ago. But Walt recognized him immediately. "Eddie." Walt's hand went slack on the doorknob. He couldn't breathe. "Mr. Hickman." Eddie's voice shook slightly. 33 years ago, you saved 4 broke kids on Route 26 in Wyoming." Walt couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stared. The other 3 stepped forward. Luke, his curly hair now peppered with gray. Sean, heavier now but with the same soft features. Yvonne Bertie Winnell but with the same soft features. Tyler, still quiet but standing taller than Walt remembered. "May we come in?" Eddie asked gently. Walt nodded. "Step back." Let them file into his tiny apartment. They filled the space immediately. 4 successful men in a room that cost $600 a month, and smelled like instant coffee and old carpet. Walt suddenly became aware of how he looked, how he lived. The unmade bed, the hot plate on the folding table, the single chair, the mini fridge that hummed too loud. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice coming out rough. "I wasn't expecting company. I would've." "You don't need to apologize," Eddie said. "Not for anything." Walt grabbed the shirt hanging on the back of the chair, and pulled it on. Tried to smooth down his hair. "How did you find me?" Luke spoke up. "It took us years. We started looking after we retired from touring. Went back to Ridgefall first. The garage was gone." Sean continued. "Torn down. Just a parking lot now." Tyler added. "We asked around town. People remembered Hickman's garage, but nobody knew where you'd gone." Eddie pulled out a folder from the leather bag he was carrying. "We hired private investigators, 3 of them over the years, checked employment records in multiple states, called every Walter Hickman we could find, showed them your picture." He pulled out a photograph from the folder. Walt's breath caught. It was the photo from the garage wall. 20-year-old Walt with his Gibson guitar. "You kept that?" Walt whispered. "Of course we kept it. We kept everything from that night." Eddie looked at Walt with eyes that were suddenly wet. "We've been looking for you for years because we made you a promise, and we don't break our promises." Walt sat down on the edge of the bed. His legs felt weak. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "Why would you spend all that time looking for me?" Luke pulled out a phone and tapped something. Music filled the small apartment. A song Walt had never heard before. Eddie's voice, younger but recognizable, singing lyrics that made the room spin. "On a frozen night in Wyoming, when our dreams had lost their way, a stranger in a garage gave us one more day. He worked through the night with grease-stained hands, never asked for nothing,
just helped us understand that kindness is the road we travel on. And the man on Route 26 made sure we carried on. The song continued, told the whole story. The broken van, the all-night repair, Hank's truck, Walt's refusal to take their $46. When it ended, Walt just sat there, couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what he'd just heard. That song became our biggest hit, Eddie said softly. Went platinum. We've played it at every single concert for decades. And every time, Luke added, we told the audience about you. About the man in Wyoming, who saved us when he had nothing left to give. Walt shook his head slowly. I had no idea. I never heard it. We figured. Sean pulled over the only chair in the room and sat down. We figured you probably didn't follow music anymore. That's why we needed to find you. To tell you in person. Eddie sat down on the bed next to Walt, not too close, giving him space. Capitol Records signed us that day. The meeting in Denver. We got a deal. Made records. Toured for years. Sold out Madison Square Garden multiple times. We had 7 top 40 hits, Tyler said. Made more money than we knew what to do with. Walt looked at them. These men who'd been kids when he last saw them. I'm happy for you. Really I am. That's wonderful. It's wonderful because of you, Eddie said firmly. Without that night, without you helping us, none of it would have happened. We'd have missed the meeting, probably would have given up, gone home, gotten normal jobs. Sean leaned forward. You changed the trajectory of our entire lives, and we never forgot it. Walt's eyes were burning. He blinked hard. I just fixed a van. That's all I did. No. Luke's voice was strong. You did so much more than that. You had nothing. Your business was foreclosed. Your family was gone. You were leaving town broke. And you still helped us. Worked all night. Called in a favor. Didn't take our money. That kind of kindness, Eddie said quietly. That's rare. That's the kind of thing that changes people. Walt wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. You didn't need to spend years finding me just to say thank you. We're not just saying thank you. Eddie pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the bed next to Walt. Open it. Walt picked up the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check. He pulled it out and looked at the amount. His vision blurred. He couldn't be reading this correctly. That's royalty money, Eddie explained. From Man on Route 26. You inspired the song, so you deserve a share. We've been saving it for you since we started making real money. Walt stared at the check. It was more money than he'd made in the last decade combined. I can't accept this, he said, his voice breaking. I can't. Yes you can. Eddie's voice was firm but kind. You earned it. And there's more. Tyler spoke up. We started a music school years ago. The Red Valley Foundation. In Los Angeles, we teach kids who can't afford lessons. Kids like we were. We want you to teach guitar there, Sean said. Full-time position, salary and benefits. We'll cover all your moving expenses. Set you up in a nice place near the school. Walt shook his head. I haven't played guitar in decades. I wouldn't even know where to start. So you'll practice, Eddie said simply. You'll relearn. We'll help you. I'm 72 years old, Walt said quietly. I'm nobody. I'm a janitor living in a studio apartment. I'm not special. You're wrong. Luke's voice was thick with emotion. You're the man who gave 4 scared kids a chance when you had nothing left to give yourself. You're the man who believed in strangers, who helped without expecting anything in return. That's about as special as it gets. Walt opened his mouth to argue, to say something, but Eddie held up a hand. There's one more thing, Eddie said. His voice was gentle, careful. We found Amber. The world stopped. Walt couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Your daughter, Eddie continued. She's 42 now. Lives in Tucson, Arizona. She's an art teacher, married, has 2 kids. That's not possible, Walt whispered. She didn't want anything to do with me. Karen made sure of that. Your ex-wife lied to both of you, Luke said gently. Amber thought you'd abandoned her. You thought she didn't want contact. But it wasn't true. Sean pulled out his phone and showed Walt a picture. A woman with dark hair and her mother's eyes. This is Amber. She heard our song, recognized the story, remembered her mom talking about Ridgefall, about a garage. She reached out to us, Tyler said. Asked if we could help her find you. She'd been trying on her own for years. Walt stared at the photo. His daughter, a grown woman he hadn't seen since she was a child. She's been looking for me. His voice cracked. For years, Eddie confirmed. When her mom died, she found a box of letters in the attic. Letters you'd sent. Letters Karen had hidden. She read them all, Luke said. Every single one. And she realized everything her mom had told her was a lie. That you never stopped trying. Never stopped reaching out. Walt's hands were shaking. The phone, the check, everything was too much. Eddie stood up, walked to the door, opened it, and there she was. Amber stepped into the apartment. Dark hair with threads of gray, her mother's eyes but her father's smile. Older now but unmistakably his daughter. "Hi, Dad," she said. And her voice was exactly like he remembered. Walt stood up, tried to speak, couldn't. Amber crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around him. "I've been looking for you for so long." Walt held his daughter for the first time in over 30 years, and finally, he let himself cry. Great racking sobs that shook his whole body. 33 years of pain and guilt and loneliness pouring out all at once. Amber cried too, held him tight, whispered, I'm here, I'm not leaving." The 4 members of Red Valley Road stood quietly by the door, giving them space. When Walt could finally speak, he pulled back and looked at Amber's face. "I'm so sorry. I tried to find you. I tried so hard." "I know," Amber said. "I read all the letters, every single one. You never stopped trying. Mom just made sure I never knew. I should have tried harder. Should have, Dad." Amber took his face in her hands. "You did everything you could. Mom lied to both of us. That's not your fault." Walt looked at his daughter, at the life she'd built without him. "Tell me about yourself. Tell me everything." They sat on the bed together. Amber pulled out her phone and showed him pictures. Her husband David, a kind-looking man with glasses and a warm smile. Their 2 children. Nathan, 12 years old, with his grandfather's eyes. Sophie, 9, with Amber's dark hair. "You're a grandfather," Amber said, smiling through tears. Twice over, the word hit Walt like a physical thing. Grandfather. He had grandchildren. 2 of them. Kids who didn't even know he existed. "Do they know about me?" he asked quietly. "They do now. I told them recently, when Eddie called and said they'd found you. Nathan wants to learn guitar. Sophie wants to meet you and see if you're as nice as I remember." Walt wiped his eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come to Tucson," Amber said. "We have a guest house. You could stay with us. Get to know your grandkids. The Red Valley Foundation has partner programs all over the country. You could teach at a school in Arizona." Eddie spoke up from across the room. "Or you could come to LA. Either way, we're going to make sure you're taken care of. No more studio apartments, no more night shifts, you've done enough of that." Walt looked around his apartment, at the life he'd built out of scraps and minimum wage, at the wooden box on the milk crate nightstand. "This is too much," he said quietly. "All of this, I don't deserve it." "Yes you do." Luke's voice was firm. "You deserve this and more." "We have one more thing to show you," Sean said. He pulled out a laptop and set it on the folding table, opened it and turned the screen toward Walt. It was a video, a concert, Madison Square Garden. "This was years ago," Eddie explained. "But we always talked about you at our shows. Always." On screen, the 4 members of Red Valley Road stood on a massive stage in front of thousands of people. Concert. Eddie spoke into a microphone, his voice echoing through the enormous venue. "Before we play this next song, I want to tell you about a man named Walt Hickman. Decades ago, when we were nobody, just 4 kids with $46 and a broken van, Walt saved us." The crowd quieted, 20,000 people listening. "He worked all night in his garage in Ridgefall, Wyoming, didn't charge us a penny, called in a favor to get us a ride to Denver for the meeting that changed our lives. We've been looking for him for years. Walt, if you're out there somewhere, if you're watching this, we want you to know something. We never forgot you. We never will.
And everything good that's happened to us started with you." The crowd erupted in applause. The band started playing "Man on Route 26, 20,000 people singing along to a song about Walt. When the video ended, Walt couldn't speak, couldn't process what he'd just seen. "We played that song at every concert for decades," Tyler said softly. "Every single one, and every time, we told your story. You've inspired more people than you know," Sean added. "Thousands of people have heard about what you did, about how one act of kindness can change everything." Walt shook his head slowly, looked at these 4 men who'd never forgotten him, at his daughter who'd spent years searching, at the check that represented more money than he'd ever had at one time. "I was just trying to help some kids," he said, his voice barely audible. "Exactly," Eddie said. "You had nothing, and you still helped. That's not just something, Mr. Hickman, that's everything." Amber took her father's hand. "Come to Tucson, meet Nathan and Sophie. Let us be a family again. Let me make up for lost time." Walt looked at his daughter, at the hand holding his, at the life being offered to him like a gift he didn't deserve but was being given anyway. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered. "I don't know if I remember how to be part of people's lives." "You don't have to know," Amber said gently. "You just have to try. We'll figure out the rest together." Walt thought about the boy in the photograph, the one with the guitar and the dreams, the one he'd buried under responsibilities and regrets and 33 years of loneliness. Maybe that boy wasn't dead. Maybe he'd just been sleeping, waiting for someone to wake him up. "Okay," Walt said finally, his voice shaking. "Okay, I'll come to Tucson. I'll try." Amber hugged him again, tighter this time. Walt closed his eyes and held his daughter and felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in decades. Hope, pure, terrifying, wonderful hope. They stayed for hours, talking, sharing stories, filling in 33 years of blank space. Eddie told Walt about the Capitol Records meeting, how they'd arrived with minutes to spare, exhausted and wired on truck stop coffee, how the producer had listened to their demo and signed them on the spot. "We recorded our first album within weeks," Eddie said. "Released it soon after. It did okay. Nothing spectacular, but the second album, that's when things took off." Luke pulled up videos on his phone, concerts, music videos, television appearances. Walt watched amazed. "You really made it," he said. "You really did it." "Because of you," Sean insisted. "If we'd missed that meeting, that would have been it. We were broke, exhausted, ready to give up. You gave us one more day," Tyler added. "That's all we needed. One more day." Walt asked about their families. All 4 were married now. Luke had 3 kids, Sean had 2, Tyler had 1, Eddie had none, but was deeply involved with his nieces and nephews. "We all stayed close," Eddie explained. "Even after we retired from touring, the band wasn't just a job, it was family." Amber told Walt about her life, about growing up in Phoenix with a mother who grew more bitter every year, about finding art as an escape, about meeting David in college, about becoming a teacher because she wanted to help kids the way she wished someone had helped her. "I thought about you all the time," she said quietly. "Mom told me you didn't care, that you'd moved on and forgotten about us, but I never quite believed it." Something always felt off about her story. "When did you know for sure?" Walt asked. "When Mom died, I was going through her stuff and found the box. Letters you'd sent, dozens of them. From when I was young. You never stopped writing." "I stopped when you were 16, Walt admitted. "The lawyer said you were old enough to reach out if you wanted to, and when you didn't, I thought maybe it was better to just let you go. Let you have the life you wanted without me complicating things." Amber's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know. I never knew any of the letters existed until Mom was gone." She showed him pictures on her phone. Nathan playing Little League baseball, Sophie at a piano recital, family vacations to the Grand Canyon, to San Diego, to the beach. "They're beautiful," Walt said. "Your kids, they're beautiful. They can't wait to meet you." Nathan especially. "When I told him his grandfather used to play guitar, he asked if you could teach him." Walt smiled. It felt strange on his face. He couldn't remember the last time he'd really smiled. "I don't know if I remember how to play." "Then you'll learn together," Amber said simply. Around noon, Eddie pulled out another envelope. This one was thicker than the first. "This is information about the job," he said. "Salary details, benefits package, housing options in Tucson. We've partnered with a music school there. They're expecting you whenever you're ready." Walt opened the envelope with shaking hands, looked at the salary figure. It was more than 3 times what he made at the college. "This is too much," he said again. "It's market rate for an experienced music teacher," Luke said. "We figured we'd start there and adjust once you're settled," Sean added. "We're also setting up a retirement account for you. We've already made the first deposit. You're 72, Walt. You should have something saved." Walt couldn't speak. The generosity was overwhelming. He'd spent so many years barely surviving, and now these men were offering him security he'd never imagined. "Why are you doing all this?" he asked. "The money, the job, the effort to find me. Why?" Eddie leaned forward. "Because you showed us what kind of person we wanted to be. You had every reason to say no that night, every reason to close the garage and drive away, but you didn't. You helped because it was the right thing to do. That night changed how we thought about success," Luke said. "It wasn't just about making it in music, it was about staying human, about helping people the way you helped us. The foundation," Sean explained, "exists because of you. We teach kids for free because you fixed our van for free. We give people chances because you gave us a chance." Tyler nodded. "You're the foundation of the foundation, if that makes sense. You're the reason we wanted to give back." Walt looked at these 4 men, these strangers who'd become the most important people in his life without him even knowing it. "I didn't think anyone would remember me," he said quietly. "I thought I'd just disappear, be forgotten." "You could never be forgotten," Eddie said firmly. "Not by us, not by the thousands of people who've heard your story. You matter, Walt. You've always mattered." Amber squeezed her father's hand. "When do you want to come to Tucson? I can help you pack. We can rent a truck, drive down together." Walt looked around his apartment, at the life he'd been living, at the wooden box that held the relics of who he used to be. "Soon," he said. "Give me a couple weeks to give notice at work, to sort things out here. We'll help with everything," Eddie promised. "Moving company, first month's rent, whatever you need." They stayed until late afternoon, ordered pizza from a place down the street, ate together in Walt's tiny apartment, talking and laughing and building something that felt like family. Before they left, Eddie pulled out one more thing, a photograph, recent, printed on glossy paper. It showed the 4 members of Red Valley Road standing in front of a building. The sign read Red Valley Foundation Music School. "That's our school in LA," Eddie said. "The Tucson location is smaller, but it's beautiful. You're going to love it." Walt held the photograph carefully, studied these 4 men who'd never given up on finding him. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick, "for everything, for remembering, for coming here, for giving me my daughter back." "Thank you," Eddie said, "for saving 4 broke kids on Route 26, for showing us that kindness is real, that good people exist." They hugged, all of them. These men Walt barely knew, but who knew him better than almost anyone. Amber was the last to leave. She held her father for a long time. "I'll call you tomorrow," she promised. "We'll make a plan. Figure out when you're coming down." "Okay," Walt said. "I'd like that." After they left, Walt sat alone in his apartment. The silence felt different now, not empty, just quiet. He opened the wooden box, took out the cassette tape, Red Valley Road demo. He'd kept it for 33 years, had never listened to it, had never had a way to listen. Maybe it was time to buy a tape player, to hear what those 4 kids had sounded like when they were young and desperate and full of dreams. Walt looked at the photograph of his younger self, the one with the Gibson guitar. "We made it," he whispered to that photograph. "Took 33 years, but we made it." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Walter Hickman went to bed with a smile on his face. Chapter 9. 3 weeks later, a moving truck pulled up in front of Amber's house in Tucson. Walt had given notice at Spokane Community College. His supervisor had been sad to see him go but happy for him. "You deserve good things, Walt," she'd said on his last day. "I'm glad you're finally getting them." He'd packed everything he owned into boxes. It hadn't taken long. Clothes, books, kitchen supplies, the wooden box with its cassette tapes and photographs. Amber and David had driven up to help. They'd rented a truck, loaded everything, and made the drive back to Arizona together. Hours through Washington, Oregon, and down into the desert. Walt had never been to Tucson. The heat hit him the moment he stepped out of the truck. Dry, intense heat that felt like standing too close to an oven. "You'll get used to it," Amber said, laughing at his expression. "By fall it'll cool down." Winter here is beautiful. The house was in a neighborhood with old trees and brick homes, streets named after poets and presidents. The main house was Spanish colonial revival style, painted cream with a red tile roof. Behind it, separated by a courtyard with a fountain, sat the guest house. "This is where you'll stay," Amber said, unlocking the door. Walt stepped inside and stopped. The guest house was small but beautiful. One bedroom, a full kitchen, a living room with large windows that looked out on a garden, hardwood floors, adobe-style fireplace. It was nicer than anywhere he'd lived in 50 years. "I can't afford this," he said automatically. "You're not paying rent," David said. He was a tall man with a gentle demeanor and thoughtfulness in his eyes. "Your family doesn't pay rent, but I should contribute something. Utilities, food, Dad." Amber put her hand on his arm. "Let us help you. The way you've been helping yourself for decades. Let someone else carry the weight for a while." They spent the afternoon unloading boxes. Nathan and Sophie helped, excited to meet their grandfather for the first time. Nathan was 12, tall for his age with messy brown hair and intelligent eyes. He kept stealing glances at Walt like he wasn't quite sure what to make of him. Sophie was 9, small and energetic, with her mother's dark hair pulled into a ponytail. She wasn't shy at all. "Mom says you used to play guitar," Sophie said, following Walt as he carried a box into the guest house. "Can you play for us?" "I haven't played in a long time, sweetheart. I'm probably pretty rusty." "That's okay. I'm learning piano and I'm not very good yet either." Walt smiled. "Then maybe we can be not very good together." That evening they had dinner in the main house. David grilled chicken. Amber made salad and roasted vegetables. The kids set the table and fought about who got to sit next to Grandpa. Walt sat at a family dinner table for the first time in over 30 years and tried not to cry into his food. After dinner, Nathan disappeared and came back with a guitar. An inexpensive acoustic, the kind you'd buy for a beginner. "Will you show me something?" Nathan asked shyly. Walt took the guitar. His hands felt clumsy on the neck. His fingers didn't remember where to go. But slowly, carefully, he found a simple chord, G major, then C, then D. He played them in sequence, a basic progression. "The kind you'd teach a kid first. The kind you'd teach a kid first. Like this," he said, showing Nathan where to put his fingers. Nathan tried. His fingers were too small, too weak to press the strings down properly. The sound came out muted and buzzing. "That's normal," Walt said. "Your fingers need to build strength. It'll take time." "How long did it take you?" Walt thought back to being 14 years old, learning to play on his father's old guitar. "Couple months before I could play a full song, but I practiced every day." "I can practice every day," Nathan said. Seriously, they worked on it for an hour. Just basic chords. Walt's fingers remembered more than he expected. The muscle memory was still there, buried under decades of disuse. Sophie watched from the couch, then asked if she could try too. By the end of the evening, Walt had taught both his grandchildren the G, C and D chords. They couldn't play them cleanly yet, but they understood the concept. "This is fun," Sophie declared. "Can we do it again tomorrow?" "If your grandpa's willing," Amber said from the doorway. She'd been watching, tears in her eyes. "I'm willing," Walt said, and he meant it. The next week, Walt started at Desert Music Academy. The school was in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial ceilings. There were practice rooms, a performance space, and a staff of 12 teachers. The director, a woman named Carmen Rodriguez, gave him a tour. "We serve about 200 students," she explained. "Most of them can't afford traditional music lessons. We operate on a sliding scale. Some kids pay nothing. Some pay what they can." "How is it funded?" Walt asked. "Grants, donations. The Red Valley Foundation covers about 60% of our operating costs." Carmen smiled. "Eddie Morrison called me personally to recommend you. Said you were someone special." "I've never taught professionally," Walt admitted. "But you taught him something important apparently. That's what matters." She showed him his classroom, a medium-sized room with 6 chairs arranged in a circle. Guitars of various sizes on stands, an amp in the corner, a whiteboard covered in chord diagrams. "Your first class is Tuesday afternoon," Carmen said. 6 students, ages 10 to 16, all beginners. Walt stood in the empty classroom and felt something stir in his chest.
something that felt like purpose. Tuesday came. 6 kids filed into Walt's classroom and sat in the circle of chairs. They were nervous. He was nervous. "I'm Mr. Hickman," he said, "but you can call me Walt if you want. I'm going to teach you guitar." A girl, maybe 13, raised her hand. "Are you any good?" Walt almost laughed. "I used to be. Been a long time since I played. So we might be learning together." They started with the basics: how to hold the guitar, how to tune it, the names of the strings. One boy, maybe 14, already knew some of this. "My dad tried to teach me," he explained, "but he got frustrated and gave up." "I won't give up on you," Walt said. "That's a promise." By the end of the hour, all 6 students could play a simple G chord. It wasn't clean, it wasn't perfect, but it was a start. After class, a woman was waiting outside, the mother of the 13-year-old girl. "Thank you," she said to Walt. "Maria's been asking for guitar lessons for years. We couldn't afford them until we found this place. She's a quick learner," Walt said. "She'll do well." The woman smiled. "She's excited." That's all I needed to see. Walt taught 4 classes that first week, 24 students total, all at different levels, all hungry to learn. He came home exhausted every night. His fingers hurt, his back hurt, his voice was hoarse from talking. But he felt alive, more alive than he had in decades. A month in, Eddie called. "How's it going?" he asked. "Good, really good. The kids are great. The school is amazing. Carmen says you're a natural teacher." "I don't know about that, but I'm enjoying it." "Good." There was a pause. Then Eddie said, "We're doing a reunion show, one night only, Madison Square Garden. We want you there." Walt's stomach dropped. "Eddie, I don't know if I can." "You don't have to perform if you don't want to. Just be there. Be our guest. Let us introduce you to the audience." "That's a lot of people. 18,000, give or take." Walt sat down on his couch. 18,000 people. The thought made him dizzy. "I'll think about it," he said. "That's all I'm asking. Just think about it." "But Walt." "Yeah, we really want you there. It would mean a lot to us." After he hung up, Walt sat for a long time, looking at his hands, thinking about the man he used to be and the man he was becoming. Amber found him there an hour later. "You okay, Dad?" she asked. He told her about the call, about the invitation. "You should go," she said immediately. "We'll all go. Make it a family trip." "I don't know if I can stand in front of 18,000 people." "You don't have to perform. Just stand there and let them thank you." Amber sat next to him. "Dad, those 4 men changed your life. Let them finish what they started." Walt thought about that. About Eddie, Luke, Sean and Tyler spending years searching for him. About them never giving up. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll go." Amber hugged him. "Good, because I already told Nathan and Sophie we were going to New York and they're very excited." Walt laughed. Really laughed. "You were pretty confident I'd say yes." "I know you, Dad. You're braver than you think." The months passed quickly. Walt taught his classes, spent time with Amber and the kids, started playing guitar again, really playing for the first time in decades. His fingers remembered, slowly at first, then faster. The chords came back, the picking patterns, the muscle memory that had been dormant for so long. He bought a new guitar, not expensive, just a decent acoustic from a local shop. Practiced in the guest house in the evenings. Nathan sometimes came over to practice with him. They'd sit together, grandfather and grandson, working through chord progressions and simple songs. "You're getting good," Walt told him one evening. "You're a good teacher," Nathan replied. In August a package arrived, from Eddie. Inside was a guitar case, expensive professional grade, and a note. "For New York, trust me, Eddie." Walt opened the case. Inside was a Gibson Les Paul, cherry red, perfectly restored. He lifted it out with shaking hands. It was almost identical to the guitar he'd owned at 20. The one he'd sold to pay for the wedding decades ago. Walt called Eddie. "I can't accept this." "You don't have a choice. You're playing it. In New York, with us." "Eddie, I told you I'm not performing. And I'm telling you that you are. We've been practicing Man on Route 26 with an extra guitar part. It's already written. You just have to learn it. I haven't played in front of people in decades." "Then it's about time you started again." Walt wanted to argue, wanted to say no, but a part of him, the part that used to be young and hungry and full of dreams, wanted to say yes. "Send me the music," he said quietly. Eddie laughed. Already in the mail. September arrived. Walt, Amber, David, Nathan, and Sophie flew to New York. First class paid for by the band. They stayed at a hotel in Manhattan, something expensive with a view of Central Park. Nathan and Sophie were excited about everything. The city, the lights, the crowds. They'd never been to New York before. The day of the concert, Walt's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You're going to be great," Amber said. She adjusted his collar. They'd bought him new clothes for the show. Dark jeans, a button-up shirt, a leather jacket that made him look like a musician instead of a janitor. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "That means you care. That's good." That evening they went to Madison Square Garden early. Eddie met them at a side entrance and led them backstage. The venue was massive. Walt could hear the crowd already, 18,000 people filling the arena, talking, laughing, waiting. "You ready?" Eddie asked. "No," Walt said honestly.
"Good, me neither. I get nervous before every show." Eddie handed him the cherry red Gibson. "But once you're out there, once you start playing, the nerves disappear. Trust me." Luke, Sean, and Tyler appeared. They all hugged Walt like he was one of them. "Part of the band. We're playing 12 songs, Luke explained. "Man on Route 26 is number 10. You'll come out for that one." "Just that one?" Walt asked. "Just that one. Unless you want to stay for the whole show." Walt shook his head. "One is plenty." They walked him through it. Where to stand, when to come on, what the guitar part sounded like. Walt practiced backstage, fingers moving over the strings, playing the progression again and again until it was automatic. Amber found him 30 minutes before showtime. "The kids are in our seats, 5th row center. They're so excited." She kissed his cheek. "I'm proud of you, Dad. I haven't done anything yet." "You said yes. That's everything." The concert started. Walt watched from the wings as Red Valley Road took the stage to deafening applause. They opened with an early hit. They sounded incredible. Older now, but still tight, still powerful. The crowd sang along to every word. Walt watched 9 songs, watched 18,000 people completely absorbed in the music, in the story these 4 men were telling. Then Luke spoke into the microphone. "This next song is special. We've played it at every show for decades, but tonight's different. Tonight the man the song is about is here." The crowd erupted. Eddie took over. 33 years ago, 4 broke kids with a broken van met a man in Wyoming who changed their lives. Walt Hickman worked all night for free, called in a favor, gave us a chance when he had nothing left to give. The applause was deafening. We spent years looking for him, and we found him. Walt's been teaching guitar in Tucson, helping kids the way he helped us. Tonight he's going to play with us. "Walt Hickman, come on out here." Someone pushed Walt gently toward the stage. His legs moved automatically. The lights were blinding. The crowd was roaring. He walked to where Eddie stood and took his place. The Gibson felt heavy in his hands. Eddie leaned close. "Just like we practiced. You've got this." The band started playing. The familiar opening chords of Man on Route 26. Walt's fingers found the strings, found the notes, and then he was playing. In front of 18,000 people, at Madison Square Garden, with the band he'd helped save 33 years ago. Eddie sang the lyrics. The story of that frozen night, the garage, the kindness of a stranger. Walt played through his terror, through his nerves, through the overwhelming impossibility of this moment, and somewhere in the middle of the song, something shifted. The fear disappeared. He wasn't a 72-year-old janitor anymore. He was a musician. He was the person he'd always meant to be. When the song ended, the crowd exploded. Standing ovation. 18,000 people on their feet. Eddie put his arm around Walt's shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man who saved Red Valley Road, Walter Hickman." The applause went on and on. Walt looked out into the crowd, couldn't see individuals, just a sea of faces and lights and joy. Then he saw them. 5th row center, Amber, David, Nathan and Sophie, all of them crying, all of them cheering. His family. Walt raised the Gibson over his head. The crowd went wild. He'd found his way home. After the concert they went to a restaurant in Manhattan, a place Eddie knew, with a private room where they could talk without cameras or fans interrupting. The band, their families and Walt's family, 20 people total, gathered around a long table. Eddie raised a glass. "To Walt Hickman, the man who proved that one act of kindness can echo for decades, that helping someone when you have nothing is the most powerful thing you can do." They all drank to that. Walt sat between Amber and Nathan, overwhelmed by the noise and laughter and life around him. Sean's wife asked him about teaching. Luke's kids wanted to know if he'd really fixed a van in one night. Tyler's daughter asked if he was going to record with the band. Definitely not, Walt said, laughing. Tonight was a one-time thing. You were great though, Eddie insisted. You should think about it. I'm 72 years old. Nobody wants to hear a 72-year-old guitarist. Age doesn't matter if you're good, Luke pointed out. Later, when the meal wound down and people started saying their goodbyes, Amber pulled Walt aside. How does it feel? She asked. Surreal, all of it. Like I'm going to wake up and I'll be back in Spokane in that studio apartment. You're not. This is real. This is your life now. Walt looked around the room, at the band who'd never forgotten him, at the family he'd found again, at the future that had appeared out of nowhere. I wasted a lot of years, he said quietly. No. Amber shook her head firmly. You survived. You kept going when everything fell apart. You did the best you could with what you had. That's not waste. That's courage. I should have fought harder for you. Should have, Dad. Amber took his hands. We found each other. That's what matters. Not the years we lost. The years we get to have now. Walt pulled his daughter into a hug, held her close, thought about all the paths his life could have taken, all the ways things could have been different. But this path, the one that led through failure and loss and loneliness to this moment, had brought him here, to this table, to this family. Maybe that was enough. 3 months later, Walt was settled into life in Tucson, teaching 4 days a week, spending time with Amber and the kids, playing guitar in the evenings. He'd sold the wooden box, not the contents, just the box itself, to a collector who appreciated the craftsmanship. The cassette tapes, the photographs, the memories, he kept those. But he moved them to a drawer. They weren't all he had anymore. Nathan was getting good at guitar, really good, could play full songs now, was talking about starting a band with some kids from school. Sophie had decided she wanted to learn guitar too, in addition to piano. So I can play like Grandpa, she explained. Walt taught them both, spent hours in the guest house with his grandchildren, passing on what he knew, not just about music, but about persistence, about failing and trying again, about not giving up on your dreams even when life gets hard. The Red Valley Foundation was expanding, opening new schools in multiple cities. They wanted Walt to help train new teachers, to share his approach. You have a gift, Carmen told him. The kids love you. They work harder for you than for anyone else. I just show up, Walt said. That's all I do. I show up and I care. That's the gift. That's what they need. One evening in December, almost a year after the band had found him, Walt sat on the porch of the guest house with a guitar in his lap. Amber came out with 2 mugs of coffee, sat down next to him. What are you working on? She asked. Just noodling. Had a melody in my head. Play it for me. Walt played what he'd been working on, a simple progression, gentle, hopeful, like sunrise after a long night. That's beautiful, Amber said. Does it have words? Not yet, maybe someday. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee, watching the sky turn orange and pink over the mountains. Are you happy, Dad? Amber asked. Walt thought about it, really thought about it, thought about the 72 years he'd lived, the failures and losses, the long decades of loneliness, the moment 4 young men had knocked on his door and given him his life back. Yeah, he said. I think I am. Good, you deserve it. So do you. I'm sorry I wasn't there for most of your life. You're here now. That's what counts. David called from the kitchen window. Dinner's ready. Amber stood up. You coming? In a minute. I want to finish this. She kissed the top of his head and went inside. Walt sat alone on the porch, guitar in his lap, and played the melody again. Played it until it felt right, until it felt true. He thought about the boy in the photograph, the 20-year-old with the dreams. Thought about what he'd say to that kid if he could go back. Probably something like, it's going to be hard. Harder than you can imagine. You're going to fail. You're going to lose things. You're going to spend decades thinking you wasted your life. But keep going. Because at the end, when you're old and tired and convinced it's over, 4 people you helped are going to show up and give it all back to you. And it will have been worth it. Every hard year, every loss, every moment of doubt, it will have been worth it to get here. Walt set the guitar down and walked inside to have dinner with his family. He was 72 years old. He'd lost decades. He'd made mistakes. He'd given up his dreams and watched them die. But dreams, he'd learned, don't really die. They just wait, sometimes for years, sometimes for a lifetime. And if you're lucky, if you're patient, if you're willing to help people even when it costs you everything, those dreams come back, changed, different, better than they were before. Walt Hickman had finally come home, not to a place but to himself, to the person he'd always been underneath the failures and the regrets. A musician, a teacher, a father, a grandfather, a man who'd learned that kindness echoes, that one good act can ripple out for decades, that it's never too late for a second chance. He'd learned that the hard way, the long way, but he'd learned it, and that made all the difference.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.